The house was quiet, not the peaceful kind, but the sort of quiet that echoes in your bones when someone you love is gone. Maryanne had lived there alone since George passed away. 48 years of marriage, 2 children, a white house with yellow shutters, and now silence. She kept everything the same: George's slippers under the bed, his coffee mug untouched on the shelf, their anniversary photo on the mantel. To Maryanne, this wasn't unhealthy, it was sacred. But Andrew, her son, thought otherwise. "Mom," he said during one of his rehearsed check-ins, "you're all alone in that big house. Clara and I have been talking. It's time you moved in with us. Family should be together." It wasn't the words that hurt, it was the sudden warmth. Too warm, too practiced. Still, Maryanne hesitated. Then he added, "Logan's excited too. He misses you." Maryanne remembered Logan barely speaking, headphones glued to his ears, smirking at her. But she missed them all. Sunday dinners, laughter in the kitchen, footsteps upstairs. And the truth was, the house was becoming harder to manage. The garden George had once loved was overgrown. The roof leaked. The stairs creaked ominously. So one February morning she said yes. She wore her lavender blouse, the one George once said made her eyes look kind. She packed a few boxes, left her home and everything it represented, and stepped into something she didn't yet understand. She expected warmth. Welcome. A family reunion. What she got was a room without a window, no space for her sewing table, boxes labeled Dad's books shoved into the garage. Clara smiled thinly. "We'll sort those later." Maryanne smiled back. She told herself she was being silly, that she should be grateful. But something small and sacred inside her flickered. A quiet voice she hadn't heard since George died whispered, "Something's wrong." The first week passed in silence. Maryanne didn't want to intrude. Clara had routines: breakfast at 7 sharp, no sugar in the pantry, and no TV in the living room after 9. Maryanne tiptoed around like a tenant, not a guest. Worse than that, she felt like a burden. Andrew was always busy: phone calls, work, rushing out the door. He'd pass by, give her shoulder a quick squeeze, and say, "You settling in okay, Mom?" She'd smile. "Yes, sweetheart." But inside she wasn't settling. She was shrinking. One afternoon, Maryanne decided to cook dinner. Meatloaf, Andrew's childhood favorite. She followed George's old recipe card, yellowed at the edges, still stained with grease. She spent hours preparing it, arranging it just right on the table, hoping desperately that it would feel like family again. When Clara saw it, she barely looked up. "Oh, you cooked tonight." Andrew took a few bites and muttered, "Not bad," then reached for the salt. Logan sniffed it and said, "Why does it smell like the 1980s? Everyone laughed. Maryanne laughed too, but her hands trembled under the table. That night, alone in her tiny guest room, once a storage closet, she sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. She missed her own bed. She missed her garden. She missed George's voice saying, "You've done enough today." Days later, Andrew handed her a stack of papers. "Just a little refinancing stuff," he said, casual. "Clara's name on a few things just makes things easier." Her name was printed at the top. "I thought you already handled all this," she said, confused. "It's just signatures, Mom." "For convenience." "Don't you trust me?" That tone, not a question, a warning. So she signed. Because she was tired. Because she still wanted to believe he cared. Because she didn't know that she was signing away more than paper. She was signing away trust. Later that week, Andrew announced a welcome dinner. "It'll be nice," he said. "Just a little something to celebrate you being here." She wore the lavender blouse again. The house filled with people: neighbors, Clara's family, Andrew's work friends. They smiled, hugged her, told her how brave she was to move in with her son. But their eyes said something else. In the backyard, Logan was by the grill, sunglasses on, looking like a celebrity. Andrew clapped him on the back. Mom used to be a librarian. She's like a walking encyclopedia. Right, Mom? She chuckled. Only about 1950s cookbooks. Logan rolled his eyes. We found like 8 boxes of that junk in the garage. It's like a time capsule. People laughed again. Maryanne stood with her cane near the driveway, talking quietly with Clara's cousin. Someone mentioned George, and she slipped into memory, recalling the little house they first bought together. She smiled, eyes far away. That's when Logan came from behind. Silent. Fast. He yanked her cane, and with a smug grin, hurled it into the busy street. Let's see how tough Grandma really is, he shouted. If she makes it back alive, she gets coffee. The cane clattered on the asphalt. Cars whizzed by. Andrew laughed. Clara laughed. No one moved. Maryanne looked around. Every face either avoided her eyes or smiled nervously. Not a single hand reached to help. So she walked. Her legs shook. Wind tugged at her blouse. She waited for a break in traffic. Her heart raced not from the danger of the cars, but from the shame. Then a stranger, a young man, appeared. He darted into the road, grabbed the cane, and handed it to her. Ma'am, are you okay? She nodded but couldn't speak. He looked at the crowd by the porch. Is that your family? She didn't answer. As she returned up the driveway, Logan sneered, Look who made it. Andrew clapped her back. Tough old bird, huh? She stumbled forward. Logan tossed a cold coffee mug onto the table. She earned it. Maryanne sat in silence, cane in hand, heart shattered. In that moment, something inside her cracked, not from pain, but clarity. They didn't see her as family. They saw her as an object to manage. Back inside the house, people gathered around the kitchen island for cake. Maryanne sat quietly at the far end of the table. The cold coffee Logan tossed her sat untouched. Clara was showing photos of their kitchen remodel. Andrew laughed loudly, louder than anyone else. Then Maryanne heard it. A whisper. She didn't even say, Thank you. Thank you. For what? For being humiliated? For earning a cold mug of coffee after nearly being hit by a car? Maryanne pressed her palm flat on the table, steadying herself. Clara leaned over, sweetly chirping. You're awfully quiet, Maryanne. Tired, yes, she replied. But she wasn't tired. She was done. That night in the windowless guest room, she sat holding her cane. Her mind returned to memories of Logan as a child, how he used to call her Nana, how she stayed up with him when he had the flu, rocking him gently through the night. He didn't remember any of that, but she did, and it mattered. She didn't cry. She sat still, listening. Downstairs, she heard Andrew and Clara's muffled laughter, then Clara's voice. I told you she'd cave. Andrew replied, We just have to keep her comfortable until the paperwork's done. She'll sign. She trusts me. Always has. Maryanne's breath caught. Her hands tightened around the cane. That was the moment everything shifted. She realized this wasn't about family. It was about control, about ownership. She had become a transaction. The next morning, Maryanne left early. She didn't tell anyone. She drove back to her house, the one they'd insisted on staging for sale. The porch light was out, the garden dry. Inside, the house was cold and still. She wandered from room to room, breathing in the silence. George's study still smelled faintly of parchment and cologne. But something was wrong. The filing cabinet drawer where they'd kept their important documents, the deed, the will insurance papers, was empty. Gone. Heart pounding, she checked the safe. Empty. Suddenly she remembered not long after George's funeral, Andrew had offered to organize the paperwork. Said he'd digitize everything so you don't have to worry. She had been too tired, too buried in grief to question it. Now she understood that grief had made her easy to erase. Her hands shaking, she called the bank. "Hello, Mrs. Beckett. How can I assist you? I'd like to check the balances on my accounts." After security verification, the teller responded, "Your checking account holds $3 down $916.52. Maryanne froze. That wasn't right. George's life insurance alone had deposited over $50,000, and the savings account she asked, currently $1.123. She gripped the phone tighter. Were there recent withdrawals? A pause. "Yes, ma'am. Monthly transfers $2,000 to $4,000 for the past 3 years." To where another pause. "To a joint account under Andrew and Clara Beckett." Maryanne's world tilted. She stared at the wallpaper she and George had chosen together in 1989. Her throat tightened. "No." "Thank you," she whispered and hung up. She wept not for the money, but because she had allowed it to happen. She had trusted him. She thought she was being cared for, but she was being managed like an asset. That afternoon, Clara called. "Hey, just checking in. You left early this morning." Maryanne stayed silent. "Well, don't wear yourself out," Clara chirped. "We were thinking, maybe this weekend we could start bringing some boxes from your house, help get the move going." Maryanne's voice was calm. "Not yet. I need to decide what I'm keeping." A pause. "Well, your room here isn't very large," Clara said just a bit too brightly. "We'll have to be selective." They weren't just planning a move. They were planning a takeover. And now, Maryanne knew. Ons niarndame. That night, Maryanne didn't go back to Andrew's house. She stayed in her own bed beneath her own sheets, surrounded by a silence that no longer felt lonely. It felt protective. Outside her window, the crickets whispered, and for the first time since George passed, she made herself a quiet promise. Not out loud, not dramatic, just a vow in her heart. She had given Andrew access, but she had never given him permission. That was the last night she slept in that house as a mother who trusted her son. From that moment on, she was someone else entirely. The next morning, the air outside felt sharper, brighter. The quiet around her wasn't empty anymore. It was hers. She sat in George's old chair, the one with the worn arms and sunken cushion, and stared at the bank statement one more time. It didn't scream betrayal. It just sat there, flat and calm like the blade of a knife. She didn't cry. She just sat in stillness. Because when your world collapses quietly, there's no screaming, only silence. A knock on the door broke that stillness. It was Nana, George's cousin's daughter, not technically family, but always calling her Aunt Maryanne. She hugged Maryanne tightly. "I've been worried about you. Someone said the house was listed. I thought you already moved." Maryanne simply handed her the bank printout. Nina read it, then went pale. "Oh my God, this is theft." Maryanne nodded. Nana took a deep breath, steadying them both. "I need to show you something, but it's not going to be easy to hear." She pulled out her phone, opened an email, and handed it over. It was from a friend who worked at a law firm, coincidentally the same firm handling the transfer of Maryanne's house. Attached were documents. A durable power of attorney, giving Andrew control over her finances. A property deed transfer, removing Maryanne's name. A will dated 6 months ago, leaving everything to Andrew and Logan. Maryanne stared at the screen. "I never signed this," she said flatly. "I believe you," Nana whispered. "But they're moving fast. They're trying to erase me." Nana's voice was tight. "They're trying to make you legally incompetent. So when you resist, they'll say you're confused." Maryanne felt the words hit her chest like lead. It wasn't just a money grab. It was a calculated erasure. That night, Maryanne couldn't sleep. She walked through every room, turning on every light. She stood in the hallway remembering where George's wedding photo had hung. They weren't just taking her home. They were taking her history. They were trying to take her identity. The next morning, Nana returned with someone else. A woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a calm strength. "Maryanne," she said, shaking her hand. "I'm Patricia Linwood, elder law attorney. Nana told me everything." They sat at the kitchen table as Patricia reviewed the documents. "These signatures are suspicious, and the notary listed here works for Andrew's company, not independent." Maryanne's stomach turned. "We have to move quickly," Patricia said. "We'll file a formal challenge on the deed, freeze the bank accounts, and notify authorities." Maryanne looked up, eyes burning. "I want to press charges." Patricia paused. "You have every right to." As Patricia left, she said one more thing. "This happens more than you think, but most women stay quiet. You're speaking up. That's the difference." Maryanne stood alone in the living room, her breath steady, her spine tall. This was no longer just a defense. It was a revolution. 2 days later, Maryanne received a text. "Dinner tonight. Just us. 6 p.m. No greeting, no warmth, just instructions." She stared at the message for a long time. Not "can we talk?" Not "hope you're okay, Mom." Just a command. She responded with a single word. Okay, she knew this dinner wasn't about food. It wasn't about family. It was a trap. At 5:55 p.m. she arrived. The front door was already open. Clara was setting the table and didn't look up. "We're doing roast chicken." "Your favorite," she said. Maryanne didn't correct her. Roast chicken had been George's favorite, not hers. Andrew appeared moments later, glass of wine in hand. "Glad you could make it, Mom," he said, kissing the air near her cheek. Maryanne smiled lightly. Of course. They sat like a picture-perfect family. Andrew at the head of the table. Clara to his right, Maryanne across from her. Logan wasn't there. Maybe they thought she'd be easier to persuade alone. They were right, but not in the way they hoped. Dinner was nice. Too nice. The roast was perfectly seasoned. The wine flowed. Clara laughed too much. Andrew asked how she was really doing. Then Andrew leaned back in his chair and said it. "So, I've been hearing some things." Maryanne raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you've been digging, asking questions, talking to lawyers." Clara froze fork halfway to her mouth. Maryanne said nothing. Andrew's voice softened. "We're just worried about you. You've been through a lot. Grief does strange things, makes people forgetful." Maryanne took a sip of water. Her voice was calm. "I'm feeling much clearer these days." Andrew smiled forced. "Good, because we think it's time to move forward. Finalize the sale, get the paperwork done." Clara joined in. "The house is too much, Maryanne. The garden and the stairs. It's not safe anymore. We want what's best for you." Maryanne placed her glass down gently. "I haven't signed the final sale documents," she said. Andrew blinked. "What do you mean I thought we already?" "I never signed," Maryanne repeated. "Not in person. Not legally." Andrew laughed too loud. "There's a notarized copy." "Yes," she said, "and I've seen it." Silence. Clara stared at her plate. Andrew stood, walked to the kitchen, leaned on the counter. "Okay," he said, arms crossed. "What's your plan, Mom? Live alone? Fall down the stairs and no one finds you for a week?" Maryanne looked directly at him. "You mean the house where I raised you? Where your father died in peace?" Clara rose and began clearing dishes. "You're being emotional," Andrew said. "No," Maryanne replied. "I'm being careful. They weren't used to this version of her. The one who didn't cry or beg. The one who had learned." Dessert came out, store-bought pie, plated like something special. Clara said, "Let's not ruin the evening. It's just dinner." Maryanne took one bite, then calmly said, I've contacted an attorney. Andrew's hand tightened on his glass. A what? An elder law attorney. She specializes in cases where older adults are being manipulated. Andrew forced a grin. Are you saying we're manipulating you? Maryanne smiled gently. I'm saying I've had enough of people making decisions for me. The silence that followed was deeper than any scream. Dinner ended minutes later. No hugs, no good night, just tension. As Maryanne stepped into the cold evening air, she didn't cry. Not because she wasn't hurt, but because there was nothing left to mourn. The mother they thought they knew, soft, silent, submissive, was gone. What remained was something far more dangerous. A woman who remembered everything. The next morning, Maryanne woke before the birds. She brewed her coffee strong, just the way George liked it. No cream, no sugar. She poured it into the chipped sunflower mug she had used for years and sat by the window in her old kitchen. Outside, the trees swayed gently. It was still her home, still her life. At 9:43 a.m., her phone buzzed. A message from Andrew. We're stopping by today, 10 a.m., be ready to talk. No, can we? No, are you free? Just a command. Maryanne didn't respond. She simply poured another cup of coffee and set it down. At exactly 9:58, their car pulled into the driveway. She saw Andrew get out, followed by Clara. But they weren't alone. A man in a gray suit stood beside them, Dr. Matthews, the family physician. The same doctor who had once pulled a splinter from Logan's finger, who had signed George's hospice paperwork. Maryanne's heart raced. They brought a doctor. They were trying to have her declared unfit. She didn't panic. She didn't open the door. She simply moved to the hallway and pressed record on the hidden phone under a scarf. Patricia's paralegal, Jessica, had promised she'd arrive before 10, and right on time headlights flashed outside. Jessica stepped out of a silver sedan with a briefcase in hand and a confident smile. She walked calmly toward the porch. Hi, she said, polite but firm. Can I help you? Andrew frowned. Who are you? My name is Jessica Lane. I'm a paralegal with Linwood Elder Law, representing Mrs. Maryanne Beckett. Clara's eyes widened. Jessica turned to the door and knocked gently. Maryanne, I'm here. Maryanne opened the door just wide enough to let Jessica in. Then she locked it again, leaving the chain on. Andrew's voice sharpened. Mom, what is this? Why are you doing this? Maryanne stood behind the door, calm, steady. I'm doing what I should have done years ago, she said clearly. Dr. Matthews stepped forward. Mrs. Beckett, I'm here to perform a simple wellness evaluation, just a few questions. No, thank you, Maryanne replied firmly. This isn't a request, Andrew snapped. We're worried about you. Jessica stepped up beside her. As her legal representative, I advise she not participate in any medical evaluation without her attorney present and of her own choosing. Clara's voice broke. Mom, you're being manipulated. Jessica didn't flinch. We're also recording this interaction. Dr. Matthews adjusted his tie. This might not be the right environment for this. Andrew's jaw clenched. You think this is over, Mom? You're really going to drag us through legal hell over a misunderstanding? Maryanne's voice was clear. It's not a misunderstanding. It's theft. It's betrayal. A long pause followed. Then Andrew pounded the door once hard. Moments later, they were gone. Inside, Maryanne sat down. Her legs shook not from fear but adrenaline. Jessica placed a hand on hers. You handled that beautifully, she said. Maryanne didn't feel beautiful. She felt raw, hollowed. But under that something stronger was growing. Dignity. That afternoon, Maryanne received a voicemail from Clara. Her voice had lost its fake sweetness. Judith Clara snapped. Using her legal name, we are very concerned. If you continue like this, we'll have no choice but to pursue a court-ordered evaluation. Logan's future is tied to this. Don't be selfish. Selfish. Maryanne nearly laughed. After raising their son, caring for George, through hospice and surviving widowhood, now she was selfish. That evening she walked out to her garden. The roses were just beginning to bloom, dusty pink, George's favorite. She stood silently watching the petals shiver in the breeze and whispered to herself, I didn't answer the door today. Not because she couldn't, but because she finally realized she didn't have to. Later that night, she pulled out Patricia's folder and laid everything across the kitchen table. Unauthorized withdrawals, deed activity, power of attorney, a timeline of betrayal, quiet, methodical. Andrew hadn't robbed her all at once. He chipped away piece by piece, always during her weakest moments. Month 6, after George died, let me help with the life insurance. Month 8, just sign here, Mom. Year 2, you're not really using that savings account, are you? Year 3, let me take care of everything. You rest. Maryanne realized grief hadn't made her forgetful. It had made her vulnerable. But she hadn't forgotten everything, because for 30 years she had worked as a librarian. She knew how to track things down. She called Nana. I need your help, she said. Not with comfort, with research. Nana answered instantly, I'm in. That afternoon they sat side by side at the kitchen table like two quiet detectives, cross-referencing bank statements, pulling utility bills, tracking emails and notarizations. They dug through county records, traced documents with Andrew's name, found strange financial filings documents showing Maryanne had allegedly gifted $80,000 to Andrew and Clara over 2 years. Maryanne had no memory of that, because it never happened. They had forged it. The more they uncovered, the angrier she became. Not a firestorm rage, a cold strategic burn. That night Clara called. Just wanted to check in, she chirped. Logan's college apps are moving fast. Berkeley, UCLA, Cornell. We're so proud. That's wonderful, Maryanne said. And expensive. There was a beat of silence. Well, you did mention wanting to help. No, Maryanne said. I didn't. Another pause. Oh. Maybe Andrew misunderstood. I think Andrew understands me perfectly, Maryanne said, and hung up. Later that night she opened George's old desk drawer. Inside was a spiral notebook, worn and curled at the edges. She opened to a page written in his handwriting. If anyone ever tries to take from you what we built, fight them. Not loudly, just smart. And Maryanne smiled. The next morning, Maryanne made 3 quiet moves. First, she opened a new bank account at a different institution and transferred all remaining funds there. Second, with Patricia's help, she filed a formal complaint with the county clerk's office, flagging the suspicious deed transfer. Third, she wrote a legal notice to Andrew, making it clear that any further attempt to act on her behalf would result in immediate legal action. She didn't mail the letter yet, but it was ready. By sunset, she sat on the back porch, sipping tea. The breeze was gentle, brushing her cheeks like the ghost of a kinder past. For the first time in years, she felt something unfamiliar, peace. Not the numb silence of grief, but the clarity of taking back control. She hadn't slammed a door. She hadn't shouted. She had simply chosen to step out of reach. That night, she and Nana began packing quietly, methodically. No boxes stacked in the hall. No rushed chaos, just one drawer at a time. Only what mattered. George's letters, the wedding band, the last cookbook she'd used, a single photo of Logan as a boy before the eye rolls before the cane, and the soft blue blanket George once wrapped around her on a cold night when neither of them could sleep. They left the silverware, the rugs, the antique clock. Let Andrew and Clara keep the things. They never understood the real inheritance. It wasn't objects. It was memory, love, endurance, and that Maryanne carried with her. On a Tuesday morning, while Clara ran errands and Andrew was at work, Jessica arrived with a small moving van. No logos, no neighbors peeking, no goodbyes. They packed up what mattered and locked the door. On the kitchen table, Maryanne left a note. Please forward any legal inquiries to my attorney. M. She didn't cry. She didn't even look back. Because this time leaving wasn't surrender. It was reclaiming. The cottage sat at the edge of a wooded lane, small with creaking floors and wide windows. It smelled of pine and possibility. Maryanne spent her first night there in silence. No buzzing phone, no demands, no Clara pretending to care. Just peace. Just herself. A week passed. Then 2. She didn't check her voicemail, didn't open emails, didn't ask about Logan, because she was done being part of a story where she didn't have a voice. Then one day Patricia sent a small envelope by courier. Inside were copies of newly filed documents, a revoked power of attorney, a certified medical statement confirming her full mental capacity, a legal notice prepared for use in case of harassment. Also inside a sticky note from Jessica. They showed up at the office. Furious. You'd be proud. Maryanne smiled not out of revenge, but because she no longer needed to explain herself. They could be angry. Let them. She was out of their reach now. And then she remembered something else. Land. Years ago, George had bought the acre of land behind their old house. Quiet land, he called it. Nothing on it. But maybe one day. Maryanne dug into Patricia's folder and found it. The original deed. Untouched, untransferred, still in her and George's name. Andrew had never even asked about it. He was too focused on what he could touch, what he could take. But not everything could be taken. That weekend Maryanne visited the land. It was overgrown, forgotten. But the sun still hit the slope just right. The air still smelled like spring. She stood there for a long time, surrounded by wildflowers and soft wind. Then she made a call. Nina, she said, do you still know that friend who works in nonprofit housing? I do, Nina replied. Why, I have land, Maryanne said, and I have an idea. 2 weeks later, the papers were filed. Marigold Place was born a land trust dedicated to building cottages for women over 60 displaced by financial or family abuse. Named after the wild marigolds George once planted in the corner of their backyard. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. The cottage sat at the edge of a wooded lane, small with creaking floors and wide windows. It smelled of pine and possibility. Maryanne spent her first night there in silence. No buzzing phone, no demands, no Clara pretending to care. Just peace. Just herself. A week passed. Then 2. She didn't check her voicemail. Didn't open emails. Didn't ask about Logan. Because she was done being part of a story where she didn't have a voice. Then one day Patricia sent a small envelope by courier. Inside were copies of newly filed documents. A revoked power of attorney, a certified medical statement confirming her full mental capacity, a legal notice prepared for use in case of harassment. Also inside a sticky note from Jessica. They showed up at the office, furious. You'd be proud. Maryanne smiled not out of revenge, but because she no longer needed to explain herself. They could be angry. Let them. She was out of their reach now. And then she remembered something else. Land. Years ago, George had bought the acre of land behind their old house. Quiet land, he called it. Nothing on it. But maybe one day. Maryanne dug into Patricia's folder and found it. The original deed. Untouched, untransferred, still in her and George's name. Andrew had never even asked about it. He was too focused on what he could touch, what he could take. But not everything could be taken. That weekend Maryanne visited the land. It was overgrown, forgotten. But the sun still hit the slope just right. The air still smelled like spring. She stood there for a long time, surrounded by wildflowers and soft wind. Then she made a call. Nina. She said, "Do you still know that friend who works in nonprofit housing?" "I do," Nina replied. "Why, I have land," Maryanne said. "And I have an idea." 2 weeks later, the papers were filed. Marigold Place was born a land trust dedicated to building cottages for women over 60 displaced by financial or family abuse. Named after the wild marigolds George once planted in the corner of their backyard. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. Dear Maryanne, I know you're tired. I know your bones ache and your heart feels like a house with too many locked rooms. I know you sit on the porch with your coffee wondering when exactly your name stopped meaning something to the people who once begged you for bedtime stories and comforted their scraped knees on your lap. But I'm writing to tell you something. You survived. You survived the look in your son's eyes when he saw you as a burden. You survived the silence of birthdays forgotten. You survived the cane thrown into the road and the walk back slow and painful but upright. You survived being erased from your own story. But more than that, you rewrote it. You learned that love without respect is a slow poison. You learned that silence can be power when it's chosen, not forced. You learned that boundaries are not cruelty, they are survival. You stopped explaining your worth. You stopped negotiating your dignity. You stopped setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. And you did more than escape. You built. You took the pain they gave you and turned it into a safe place for others. You took the house they weaponized and replaced it with a cottage filled with peace. You took the name they tried to reduce and made it a banner. And now they remember you, not as a burden, but as the woman who left without a word and built a legacy from silence. If someone reads this letter one day, let them know a woman's worth is not tied to who calls her on Sunday. It is not measured by how long she is tolerated. It is measured by what she dares to reclaim. So if your legs hurt, rest, but do not fold. If your heart aches, grieve, but do not vanish. And if they throw your cane again, let them. You have your own feet now. Maryanne,